The heavy doors of Commander Valerius's private office slid shut, muffling the lingering chaos from the diplomatic gala. Jack's lucky roamer stood ramrod straight, though his insides churned like a nebula in a gravity storm. Ambassador Krelix, his Zidonian face a mask of cold fury, advanced on Valerius. "Your officer, Commander," Krelix's voice was a low, dangerous hiss, like gas escaping a cracked seal, "has committed an act of ultimate vulgarity. He has propositioned Attaché Lyra Vane with the ritualistic pledge of souls. We demand his immediate surrender for Zidonian justice." Jax's blood ran cold. "Pledge of souls," he stammered, his voice barely a squeak. He risked a glance at Valerius, whose own face was rapidly losing color. "Sir, I just said she ate gracefully. Something about moon moths." Valerius, ever the diplomat even when staring down the gullet of a diplomatic black hole, attempted damage control. "Ambassador, surely there's been a misunderstanding. Officer Romer is new to some intergalactic customs." "Ignorance," Krelix spat, his eyes narrowing to slits, "is no excuse for defiling our most sacred traditions. The pledge of souls is irrevocable once uttered with intent." His hand strayed to the ceremonial dagger at his hip, a clear, unambiguous threat. What kind of mess had Jack stumbled into this time? This felt different. Bigger. Before Valerius could formulate another placating response, the office doors burst open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the imposing, scaled form of Warlord Grok. The Kthar warrior, his breath smelling faintly of sulfur and roasted tarred meat, filled the doorway, his glinting battle harness scraping against the frame. "Krelix." Grok's voice boomed, rattling the awards on Valerius's shelf. "Your Zidonian traditions are as soft as a newborn grackworm. Human Romer shows Kthar spirit. He makes a bold claim before warriors. We, the Kthar, offer mediation, the gauntlet of 1,000 scars." Grok pounded his massive, clawed fist against his chest plate, a sound like boulders colliding. Valerius looked from the incandescent Zidonian to the gleefully savage Kthar and seemed to deflate. "The gauntlet of 1,000 scars," he whispered, as if the words themselves tasted like ash. Jax didn't like the sound of that. Not one bit. One scar sounded bad enough. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done with Jax Romer yet. The door chimed, a polite, almost deferential sound that was somehow more ominous than Grok's entrance. Sage Alara, the Zidonian chief cultural advisor, a figure of serene, ancient wisdom, glided into the room. Her presence momentarily calmed the simmering aggression. "Commander Valerius, Ambassador Krelix, Warlord Grok," she began, her voice a melody that contrasted sharply with the harsh tones preceding it. "I must confirm. Officer Romer's words, however accidental their phrasing, have indeed, by ancient precedent, initiated the pledge of souls." Her gaze, surprisingly sharp for one so seemingly gentle, fell on Jax. "Tradition dictates, and Zidonian high law affirms in matters of such public declaration, that he must formally continue the process with Attaché Vane. The only alternative is exile. For him, and for his people from all Zidonian recognized space." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. That, regrettably, would include Earth's petition to the Galactic Trade Alliance. Valerius ran a hand over his face. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice heavy with disbelief and a dawning horror. "Romer here needs to apologize, somehow survive a Kthar death trial that sounds like something out of a barbarian's nightmare, and participate in a Zidonian courtship ritual he clearly knows nothing about, or Earth gets blacklisted. Sage Alara, Warlord Grok, and even Ambassador Krelix, though the latter with a grim satisfaction. All nodded. One Zidonian, one Cthar, one human. 3 distinct species, one shared, impossible problem. Jax felt the room spin. This wasn't just a diplomatic incident anymore. This was triple jeopardy. His stomach did a flip that would have impressed an 0G acrobat. Could one man really screw up this badly? Later, after what felt like an eternity of tense, multi-species negotiations about the precise order of his impending doom, Jax found himself pacing the observation lounge of the Stardust Drifter. He'd requested to speak with Lyra Vane alone, a desperate bid to apologize directly, to somehow undo the tangled knot his tongue had tied. Valerius, after much grumbling about throwing good sense after bad, had reluctantly agreed. What else could he do? The doors slid open, and Lyra entered. She moved with a fluid grace that made his heart ache, her silver hair catching the distant starlight from the viewport. Her emerald eyes were wary, guarded, but beneath the caution, Jax thought he saw a flicker, a spark of something that might have been curiosity. Or was that just wishful thinking? Around her neck, nestled against the high collar of her formal attire, was a small, intricately carved locket of a dark, swirling metal he hadn't noticed before. It seemed to hum with a faint, almost subaudible energy. The whispering locket. Attaché Vane. Lyra, Jax began, his voice hoarse. He gestured vaguely to a seating alcove. Please. I am so sorry. More sorry than I can possibly say. I had no idea what that phrase, what I said, actually meant. I swear on my career, what's left of it. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. I overheard it on Xylo's station. An exotic animal vendor was saying it to a Zidonian customer, and they both laughed. I thought, he trailed off, the foolishness of it all crashing down on him. How could he have been so stupid? Lyra listened, her head tilted slightly, an almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips as he described the scene with the vendor. It wasn't a mocking smile, more knowing. When he finished, a heavy silence filled the space between them, broken only by the distant thrum of the ship's engines and that faint, almost imperceptible hum from her locket. Then, she spoke, her voice as soft as stardust. That vendor, Officer Romer. Jax, was likely what we call a kismet weaver. A pairing facilitator. She paused, a delicate flush rising on her leaf-green skin. What your people might term, a matchmaker. Jax's face burned. Oh no. The full weight of his blunder, the sheer, unadulterated, galaxy-sized scale of his screw-up, hit him like a Cthar battle ram. So I basically, his voice cracked, suggested we engage in reproductive activities. In extremely explicit, ritualistic terms. Lyra nodded, the blush deepening. In the most explicit, binding, and traditionally irrevocable terms, yes. Her eyes, however, held not contempt, but that strange, intriguing spark. But it is also true that no human, no off-worlder of any species, has ever dared attempt our high tongue for such a personal matter. Or invoked the pledge of souls, even accidentally, for generations. She admitted that many Zidonians, particularly the younger ones, found the ancient traditions restrictive, even stifling. His audacity, despite the catastrophic vulgarity of his actual words, seemed to intrigue her. The locket on her neck pulsed once, with a soft, warm inner light, a fleeting glow unseen by Jax as he was too busy wishing the floor would swallow him whole. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a bizarre connection forming in the wreckage of his diplomatic career. He was in a universe of trouble. No doubt about it. But as Lyra Vane looked at him, something shifted. Maybe, just maybe, there was a glimmer of something else. Hope. Or just a different flavor of impending doom. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared, a screaming red alert that shattered the fragile moment. Valerius's voice, tight with urgency, crackled over the comms, "All hands to stations. Unidentified vessels approaching. Kthar battle cruisers, 3 of them. They're hailing us, demanding Romer for the gauntlet. Now." Lyra's eyes widened, a new, very real alarm replacing the curiosity. This was it. The first part of his triple jeopardy had arrived. The insistent blare of the red alert klaxons was almost a relief, a known terror slicing through the nebulous dread that had enveloped Jax Romer. He and Lyra Vane exchanged wide-eyed, alarmed glances. Whatever private understanding, or further misunderstanding, they were teetering on the brink of was violently shoved aside by the ship-wide emergency. This was no drill. Their infinitely complicated diplomatic entanglement had just become the least of their immediate problems. Or had it? You can't just surround a diplomatic vessel and demand my officer for a death trial. Commander Valerius's voice, amplified and strained, roared from the bridge of the Stardust Drifter, his image flickering on the auxiliary viewscreen Jax and Lyra had rushed to in the chaos of the corridor. On the main viewscreen, Warlord Grok's massive, scaled face, framed by the harsh, utilitarian lighting of his Kthar battle cruiser's command center, grinned, a horrifying vista of serrated teeth. If this was the Kthar idea of a friendly negotiation, Jax really didn't want to see them angry. First challenge, piloting. Grok boomed, his voice vibrating the very deck plates of the human ship. Human Romer navigates the Stardust Drifter through the asteroid field of Cordum. Proves courage. Proves worth. A collective gasp went through the human bridge crew, whose panicked faces Jax could see in the periphery. The ship's navigator, a young ensign named Miller, whispered, pale-faced, "Commander, there's no asteroid field of Cordum in this sector. Or any charted sector nearby." As if on cue, the long-range sensors flared, a cacophony of warning chimes erupting. "Sir," the tactical officer cried out, his eyes widening. "The Kthar cruisers, they're deploying something. Thousands of small objects, metallic composition, varying mass. They're creating an artificial asteroid field around us." Artificial asteroids. A makeshift death trap. Jax felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This was insane. Even for Kthar. He'd heard tales of their brutal warrior culture, but this was a new level of diplomacy. Yet, amidst the fear, a different, almost forgotten sensation stirred within him, the familiar itch of adrenaline, the phantom feel of a flight stick in his hands. He was a communications officer now, a talker, usually a disastrous one. But before that, Jax Romer had been a test pilot. One of the best, a whisper of his former self reminded him. He pushed past a scrambling crewman and stepped onto the bridge. All eyes turned to him. "Sir," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, addressing Valerius. "I can do this." He ignored the commander's incredulous stare. "And," he added, a reckless grin tugging at his lips, "if I scratch your precious ship, you can finally ground me like Ambassador Krelix once." Valerius looked like he'd aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. He stared at Jax, then at the rapidly forming Kthar obstacle course on the main screen, then back at Jax. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the entire human diplomatic corps. "Take the auxiliary controls, Romer." "Auxiliary only." "Lieutenant Chen, You monitor him. One dent, Romer, one single scratch on my paintwork, and you'll be cleaning plasma conduits with a toothbrush for a year. Understood? Crystal, Commander. Jack slid into the one pilot's chair at the auxiliary station, his fingers dancing over the controls, a ghost of muscle memory guiding them. The Stardust Drifter wasn't a fighter, not by a long shot. She was a diplomatic vessel, built for comfort and long hauls, not for threading needles in a Ktharmade hellscape. But she was sturdy. And right now, she was his only way through. The metallic spheres already filled the void around them, ranging in size from oversized grackballs to small personnel carriers, spinning and tumbling with a malicious, unpredictable randomness. Lyra Vane had followed him to the bridge, her presence a strange, unexpected comfort amidst the controlled chaos. She moved to stand just behind his chair, close enough that he could smell the faint, exotic floral scent that seemed to cling to her Zidonian attire. He was acutely aware of her, of the slight warmth radiating from her. Was this part of the Zidonian pledge of souls? Moral support during near-death experiences? In Zidonian lore, Jax Romer, she whispered, her voice a low counterpoint to the frantic chatter of the bridge crew and the Kthar warlord's occasional taunts. Skill in navigating chaos, in finding a path through the impossible, is considered highly attractive. His hands faltered momentarily on the controls. Attractive? Was she flirting with him? No. In the middle of a Kthar death trial? He risked a quick glance up at her. Her emerald eyes were fixed on him, an intensity in their depths that sent a jolt of something hot and unfamiliar coursing through his veins, something far more potent than the pilot's adrenaline. Her lips were curved in the faintest of smiles. Oh. Right. The pledge of souls. This was probably part of her assessment. He swallowed hard. Then I'd better make this good, he murmured, more to himself than to her, and turned his full attention back to the deadly dance outside the viewport. With a practiced precision he hadn't realized he still possessed, Jax eased the Stardust Drifter forward. The massive ship groaned in protest as he pushed her maneuvering thrusters to their limits, but she responded. Slowly, then with increasing confidence, he guided her into the spinning metallic chaos. He calculated trajectories on the fly, adjusting course with fluid grace, his mind a whirlwind of vectors and probabilities. He wasn't just flying, he was anticipating, reacting, becoming one with the ship. It was like no flight he'd ever undertaken. The stakes? Only his life, the lives of the crew, and quite possibly Earth's future in the Galactic Trade Alliance. No pressure. The breach fell into a hushed silence, broken only by the occasional beep of instruments and Jax's own ragged breathing. Even Commander Valerius seemed transfixed, watching the display of piloting skill with a mixture of horror and grudging admiration. He's good, Lieutenant Shen, the primary helm officer Jax had temporarily displaced, whispered to the navigator. Damn good, the navigator agreed, his eyes glued to the screen. A particularly large cluster of spheres loomed ahead, spinning in a complex, interlocking pattern that left no obvious path. It was a wall of tumbling metal. Can't go around it, Jax muttered, his knuckles white on the controls. No room. We'll have to go through it. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. This was it. Make or break. He rerouted auxiliary power to the maneuvering thrusters, felt the ship shudder, then executed a rolling dive, a desperate, beautiful pirouette that sent the Stardust Drifter spiraling through a momentary, razor-thin gap in the obstacle pattern. The ship's hull plating passed within meters, centimeters, of several jagged spheres, alarms screaming, but never made contact. Lyra gasped beside him, her hand unconsciously gripping his shoulder. The contact, The pressure of her fingers through the fabric of his uniform sent a jolt of pure electricity through him, heightening his already razor-sharp focus, steadying him in the heart of the storm. Through the chaos, as he threaded another impossible needle, Jax's console briefly flickered. An anomalous energy reading, deep within the densest part of the artificial field, a faint, structured signal, pulsing with a strange, ancient rhythm. It wasn't Kthar tech. It wasn't anything he recognized. The navigator's ghost signal. He mentally tagged its coordinates, his pilot's brain automatically logging the anomaly even as he fought for their lives. No time to analyze. Survive first. Ask questions later. If there was a later. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 intense, heart-stopping minutes, the Stardust Drifter burst through the last of the metallic debris and into clear space. The breach erupted in spontaneous, ragged applause. General Grok's booming, guttural laugh filled the comm system. Excellent. Human roamer has warrior's hands. First test passed. Jax leaned back in his seat, every muscle screaming, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He was drenched in sweat, his heart still hammering against his ribs, but a grin stretched across his face. He'd done it. Lyra's hand still rested on his shoulder, her touch a burning brand through the fabric of his uniform. He looked up at her, and her emerald eyes were shining. That was, she began, her voice husky, her usual Zidonian composure slightly frayed. Just the beginning, Jax finished, meeting her gaze, a wild, reckless energy coursing between them. He had no idea what came next, but for the first time since that disastrous compliment, he felt a flicker of something other than terror. He felt alive. And, looking at Lyra Vane, at the dawning admiration in her incredible eyes, he felt something else too. Something dangerously like hope. The locket around her neck gave another soft, warm pulse, a silent affirmation in the sudden quiet of the bridge. The triumphant cheers following Jax's improbable piloting feat still echoed in his ears as Warlord Grok's booming voice cut through the dwindling adrenaline rush. First test passed, the Kthar image declared from the view screen, his reptilian features split by a terrifyingly wide grin. But before Jax could even properly process his survival, Grok continued, second test, combat of the soul. Human roamer must face Elder Forlag on the Kthar flagship. Now. Commander Valerius, who had just started to regain some color, paled again. Now see here, Grok, you can't just. We accept, Jax interrupted, surprising himself as much as everyone else on the bridge. He stood, a newfound confidence, or perhaps sheer adrenaline-fueled insanity, coursing through him. He'd just flown a diplomatic barge through a Kthar death trap. What could an old Kthar combat master throw at him that was worse? Besides, he'd caught Lyra Vane's expression as Grok made his pronouncement, a flicker of fear, yes, but also something else, something that looked shockingly like admiration. And that, Jax found, made him willing to face just about anything. Lyra caught his eye as Valerius began to argue heatedly with Grok about interstellar law and diplomatic immunity, an argument Grok seemed to find immensely entertaining. Jax, Lyra said softly, her voice a low melody that cut through the commander's tirade. What you just did, in my culture, that display of skill, of navigating such impossible odds, it would be considered a most impressive demonstration for the Pledge of Souls. Really? A genuine smile, the first truly unforced one in what felt like ages, touched Jax's lips. And what, traditionally happens after such a successful demonstration? He couldn't help himself. The question just slipped out. Lyra's leaf-green skin flushed a deeper, more vibrant shade, like sunlight on new spring leaves. Traditionally, she murmured, her gaze dropping for a moment before meeting his again, her emerald eyes darker, more intense. The culmination would follow. The way she said, culmination, the slight tremor in her voice, the way her breath hitched almost imperceptibly, it made Jax's heart do a double-time Cthar war drum solo against his ribs. "I'm looking forward to learning more about your traditions, Lyra," he said, his own voice dropping, pitched low enough that only she could hear over Valerius's increasingly desperate objections. Her eyes, if possible, darkened further, a captivating blend of desire and something that might have been apprehension. "Human customs are so direct," she whispered back. "It's both frightening and, exhilarating." Before Jax could respond to that rather promising, if terrifying, admission, Valerius stormed over, his face a thundercloud. "Romer, you're actually going through with this? You're going to board the Cthar flagship for this combat of the soul?" He gestured wildly at the view screen where Grok was now idly sharpening a massive claw on a piece of bulkhead. "Apparently, it's some kind of ritual, mental wrestling match. Or something." Grok isn't exactly forthcoming with the details. "Wrestling?" Jax repeated, trying to keep the surprise out of his voice. "Mental wrestling? What did that even mean?" "Still, I can handle that," he hoped. "You'd better," Valerius muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Because somehow, Romer, this entire fiasco has become a matter of human honor. Ambassador Krelix is watching these proceedings with, let's call it, rapt attention. And Starfleet Command has been notified. They're concerned. Very concerned." He gave Jax a look that clearly said, "Don't you dare make this worse." As Jax prepared to depart for the Cthar ship via a rather intimidating Cthar shuttle, all sharp angles and exposed weaponry, Lyra caught his arm. Her touch was light, yet it sent a shiver down his spine. "Be careful, Jax," she said, her voice earnest. "Cthar combat rituals, even the mental ones, can be intense. An elder Forlag, he is ancient, and his mind is a labyrinth." "I'll come back to you, Lyra," Jax promised, the words carrying a weight, a depth, he hadn't intended but felt with every fiber of his being. He wasn't just saying it to reassure her, he was making a vow to himself. He would come back. Her fingers lingered on his arm for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "I'll be waiting," she said softly, her emerald eyes holding his. "To continue our cultural exchange." The interior of the Cthar battle cruiser, the Karanakes Fong, was exactly as inviting as its name suggested, hot, dimly lit by flickering crimson emergency lights that seemed to be their standard illumination, and smelling faintly of sulfur, ozone, and something else, something vaguely like burnt metal and old blood. Jax followed his escort, a hulking Cthar warrior nearly twice his size whose nameplate identified him as Grak the Disemboweler, charming, through winding, narrow corridors lined with what appeared to be trophy weapons taken from a dozen different, unfortunate species. How reassuring. "Human ready for combat?" Grak growled, his voice like rocks grinding together. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jax replied, rolling his shoulders to loosen them, trying to project an air of confidence he was miles away from feeling. He'd expected to be led to some kind of brutal arena, perhaps with a cheering crowd of bloodthirsty Cthar. Instead, they entered a surprisingly serene, circular chamber. The walls were lined with dark, worn cushions, and the air was thick with the scent of some alien incense that tickled his nostrils. In the center of the room, seated on a raised dais, was Warlord Grok, and beside him, a smaller, though no less imposing, Cthar. This one was ancient, his scales faded to the color of old parchment, cracked and weathered like a desert landscape. His eyes, though, burned with a keen, unervingly bright intelligence. Human roamer. Grok boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the chamber. Meet Elder Forlag, Kthar combat master of the mind. Jax offered a respectful bow, a human gesture he hoped translated. It's an honor, Elder Forlag. The ancient Kthar studied Jax with those knowing, millennia-old eyes, making Jax feel like a particularly uninteresting microbe under a very powerful microscope. Sit, human, Forlag commanded, his voice a surprisingly soft, dry rasp, like sand shifting over ancient bones. Jax complied, lowering himself onto a cushion across from the elder. He tried to keep his breathing even, his posture relaxed but alert. What was coming? A psychic probe? A barrage of mental attacks? Combat, Elder Forlag explained, his gaze unwavering, is not always of claw and fawn, human. He slowly raised a gnarled, three-fingered claw and tapped his own temple. Sometimes, it is here. Jax blinked in surprise. A mental challenge, then. A battle of wills. Warlord Grok let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountainside. Kthar not just warriors of body, human. Also warriors of mind. Many species think us only brutes. Is why Kthar wins so many battles. He gestured to a nearby view screen where Jax could see the Stardust Drifter hovering in space, looking small and vulnerable. Another screen showed the observation deck of the human ship, where both the human and Zidonian delegations had gathered to watch the proceedings. He spotted Lyra immediately, standing slightly apart from her fellow Zidonians, her silver hair a beacon in the dim light. Her whispering locket was visible even at this distance, a dark enigma against her throat. Knowing she was watching, it didn't exactly calm his nerves. Challenge is simple, human, Elder Forlag continued, his voice drawing Jax's attention back. I create illusion. You must find truth within. Maintain control of your emotions. Show wisdom worthy of diplomatic trust. Worthy of Kthar respect. Before Jax could ask for clarification, before he could brace himself, the elder reached forward with surprising speed and pressed a cool, dry, scaled palm against Jax's forehead. The room dissolved. Lyra Vane's invitation, a tantalizing whisper of a private discussion about the culmination phase of the Pledge of Souls, still hum warm and charged in the Shovel Bay air around Jax Romer. His pulse was doing a frantic jig, a wild counterpoint to the Kthar war drums that had been his soundtrack for the past few hours. Culmination. Private. With Lyra. Could this day get any more surreal? Apparently, it could. Before Jax could stammer out a reply, before he could even fully process the dizzying implications of her words, the shuttle bay doors hissed open with violent force. Commander Valerius burst in, his usually immaculate uniform askew, his face a mask of grim urgency. He looked like a man who had stared into the void and found it staring back with very large, very hungry teeth. Romer. Vane. Emergency Council. Now. Valerius barked, his voice strained. The Zidonian High Council is on direct hololink from Zydos Prime. And they're not alone. We've just detected a massive fleet at the edge of explored space, unknown configuration, shields up, weapons hot. They call themselves the Forlag Hegemony. The name sent an icy shiver down Jax's spine, extinguishing the warm glow Lyra's invitation had kindled. Forlag Hegemony. He'd heard whispers, fragmented horror stories from grizzled space traders in shadowy station cantinas. An ancient enemy, a locust fleet that swept through systems, consuming everything, leaving only silence and cold, dead worlds in their wake. Legends, he'd thought. Boogeymen to scare fresh cadets. But the look on Valerius's face, that was no legend. That was stark, unadulterated terror. The main conference room of the Stardust Drifter was a tense, crowded tableau. Shimmering, life-sized holographic figures of the Zidonian High Counselors dominated one end of the massive obsidian table, their ornate robes and severe expressions radiating an aura of immense, ancient power. Opposite them, Commander Valerius and his human diplomatic team looked small and uncomfortably mortal. Warlord Grok and Elder Forlag, having transported over from their battle cruiser with a disconcerting lack of ceremony, took up a significant portion of one side of the table, their Kthar presence an unspoken, musky threat. Jax and Lyra were ushered to seats in the middle, a symbolic, and deeply uncomfortable, bridging position. The air crackled with unspoken anxieties and the low thrum of the ship's engines, a sound that suddenly felt less like a heartbeat and more like a dirge. The four-lag hegemony has been sighted, the eldest Zidonian counselor intoned, his voice resonating with a gravity that chilled the room further. His holographic form shimmered slightly, a disconcerting reminder of the vast distances and precarious technology that connected them. Their trajectory threatened Zidonian, Kthar, and human-explored space. Their vanguard will reach the Theron Nebula within 3 standard rotations. Warlord Grok let out a guttural snarl, his massive claws clenching into fists that could crush plasteel. The four-lag. Ancient locusts. They consume all. Leave nothing but dust and echoes. His voice was a rumble of primal fury. Jax could almost taste the Kthar's racial memory of this ancient foe. This wasn't just a threat, it was a generational vendetta. Elder Forlag, surprisingly, nodded his wizened head in agreement with Grok's outburst. A formidable foe, the ancient Kthar rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across stone. Alliance is necessary. Survival demands it. The Zidonian counselor continued, his gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives. We propose, therefore, a formal tri-species alliance. Human adaptability and unconventional thinking, Zidonian advanced technology and strategic depth, Kthar military might and unwavering ferocity. He paused, letting the weight of the proposal sink in. Together, we might stand a chance. Divided, we will all be consumed. Commander Valerius nodded thoughtfully, his face grim. Earth would certainly be interested in such an arrangement, honored counselor. The four-lag hegemony is a threat to all civilized life. However, he added, a note of caution creeping into his voice, these negotiations, the treaties, the logistical integrations, they typically take months. Years, even. No time. Grok roared, slamming a fist onto the table with enough force to make the holographic counselors flicker violently. Several Zidonian aides winced. Four-lag come now. We fight now, or we die now. The Zidonian counselor's gaze, ancient and piercing, fixed on Jax and Lyra. A sudden, prickling sense of unease crawled up Jax's spine. He knew that look. It was the look of a chess master about to sacrifice a pawn for a devastating checkmate. There is an expedited path, the counselor said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur that somehow filled the entire room. An ancient Kthar tradition, one which Zidonian high law, under conditions of extreme existential duress, can recognize for the purposes of immediate alliance ratification. He paused, his eyes locking onto Lyra, then Jax. It speaks of unions sealed by proven compatibility between designated species representatives. Jax felt the blood drain from his face. Proven compatibility? What in the 7 stars did that mean? He had a horrible, sinking feeling he already knew. He risked a glance at Lyra. Her face was pale, her hand instinctively going to the whispering locket at her throat, which seemed to pulse with a faint, agitated light. Elder Foreleg's ancient eyes, which had been closed in contemplation, snapped open. And was that a twinkle of amusement in their reptilian depths? Kthar tradition, the old warrior rasped, a dry chuckle escaping his lips, requires proof of potential viable offspring to seal a blood bond alliance. A child to bind the fates of our peoples. A child. Jax's mind reeled. They wanted him and Lyra to make a baby. To save the galaxy. Commander Valerius exploded. That's barbaric. Preposterous. We can't base an interstellar alliance on biological roulette. What if they're not compatible? What if? Grok shrugged his massive, scaled shoulders, the movement rippling through his battle harness. Why not, human? Kthar always do. Strong unions make strong children. Strong children make strong future. Is logical. He bared his teeth in what Jax was beginning to recognize as a Kthar smile. It wasn't reassuring. Lyra, who had remained silent throughout this insane exchange, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on her locket, finally spoke. Her voice, though quiet, cut through the rising tension with surprising clarity and firmness. Commander Valerius, she began, addressing the human, but her eyes were on Jax. Among Zidonians, the culmination of the Pledge of Souls is profoundly binding. If Officer Romer and I were to complete the ritual, it would indeed create an unbreakable precedent for alliance under our most ancient laws. Especially, she added, her voice dropping slightly, when facing an existential threat like the Forelag hegemony. Every eye in the room, holographic and physical, turned to Jax. He felt like an insect pinned to a display board. The fate of 3 species, the looming shadow of the all-consuming Forelag hegemony, the desperate hope of a last-minute tri-species alliance, all of it, somehow, hinging on the most intimate, personal decision of his life. With a woman he'd known for less than a standard day. A woman he'd catastrophically insulted, then what? Almost connected with. A woman who, despite everything, made his heart do things it had no business doing. The locket on Lyra's chest pulsed again, a little stronger this time, its faint hum now a discernible, melodic vibration. And for a fleeting, impossible second, Jax thought he heard a soft, almost inaudible sigh, like a whisper of ancient starlight, emanating directly from the strange Sidonian artifact. A sound no one else in the room, caught in the maelstrom of galactic crisis, seemed to register. What secrets did that locket hold? And what new level of insanity was his life about to embrace? The Zidonian counselor's pronouncement, "We will reconvene in 3 standard hours for your decision," echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the conference room. Holograms winked out, dignitaries shuffled away, muttering in their own tongues, leaving Jax, Romer and Lyra Vane adrift in an ocean of impossible choices. A child. To seal an alliance. To save 3 species from the ravenous Forelag hegemony. It was beyond insane, it was the stuff of cosmic, terrifyingly bad, drama. Well, Jax finally managed, his voice a hoarse croak that sounded alien even to his own ears. He ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. That wasn't exactly how I imagined our relationship progressing. He risked a look at Lyra. Her usually composed features were etched with a complex mixture of emotions, shock, certainly, but also a startling determination and something deeper, something that made his breath catch. Lyra's lips curved into a small, weary smile. "Humans," she said, her voice a soft counterpoint to the lingering tension, do possess a remarkable talent for understatement, Jax Romer. She rose and walked to the viewport, staring out at the star-dusted canvas of space. Our choice, she repeated, more to herself than to him. Not a diplomatic decree. Not a Kthar blood pact. Not a Zidonian High Council edict.